We are now in the panel entitled Indigenous and Subcultural Contexts. Our first speaker, we've got two speakers, Faye and Maya. We start with Faye Gebara here. She is a lawyer and anthropologist, specializes in merging indigenous and scientific knowledge, advocates indigenous cosmologies, dare I say, / metaphysics, researches consciousness in non-human entities, very interesting, and aims to protect indigenous rights. So please give it up for Faye.
Hello, everyone. Thank you, Peter, for the nice introduction. And thanks for the organizers as well for being here in such a inspiring workshop. I'm learning a lot. I hope you were still awake for this last session. And I also feel a lot of pressure on my talk because a lot of people make mentions that, oh, I will leave this to the anthropologist and so on. And to be honest, I feel already that a lot of the things that I am going to talk about have been said here, but hopefully I'm going to give you another perspective. And I also tried to keep it simple, because I think that's how, like, if we had an indigenous scholar here to present for you, that's the way they would do it. So hopefully I'm gonna honor their ways of doing it as well. So let's start. So I'm gonna look at the concept of integration from an indigenous perspective. And I think this concept is actually foreigner to them. And I've chosen this picture, which is constructed by Midjourney, just to illustrate an indigenous ritual that it's actually led by a bufu, because I trust that many of us here, we still need to connect better to the fact that for indigenous people, psychedelics, what we call psychedelics, for them are actually spirits, are medicines that have a spirit, as Andy was mentioning here from the Yawanawá talk. And these spirits are actually the ones in charge and leading a ritual or a spiritual session, and being like the main teacher of this ritual of the session, or a ceremony, as they call. And I'll come back to this. And I'll also give some examples from the Yawanawá culture and also from the Huniquim, which are groups from Brazil. So in terms of the etymology of the verb to integrate, we have that to integrate comes from the Latin integrare, meaning make whole, complete, to render something whole, bring together the parts of something. And as we've seen this afternoon in the psychedelic context, a wide range of definitions have been put forward, characterized by an even wider variety of practices, integrative practices. Historically without models, as Andy was showing, or guidance as to when and why particular practices might be chosen. But what about the indigenous context? And for that, I think it's important to ask as well, what are we integrating when we look at such a context? So broadly speaking, indigenous practices rely on some important components, such as the community, the group, what some of them call the family, the spiritual belief, the different spiritual beliefs and different traditions, the chants, the prayers, the art, the care they have with the body, they have with themselves and with each other. And also, of course, the relationship with other than human beings, being them alive or not, meaning the spirits, the people that have passed away, what they call their ancestors. So, and in their vision, mind, body, community, spirit, nature normally tend to be seen as a unified entity. With daily life, with spirituality, and also with medicine, and not seen as separate as normally we do in our society. And imbalance or separation between these elements is actually, in their vision, what causes illnesses and diseases. So when we talk about the indigenous context, for me, it's very important to think about rituals. And since I've begun to work with indigenous people, I have thought a lot about ceremony and ritual. And I think all societies have ceremony, rituals, including religious rituals, sacraments, national rituals, seasonal festivals, and so on. Like birth, marriage, death. There are many different types of rituals, and these are generally community and culturally based and follow a traditional formal pattern. And they imply a kind of continuity, a memory that is transmitted from past generations through the practice of the ritual itself, as they bring the past to the present. And I like very much the views of American anthropologist Gregory Bateson, where he thinks that certain kinds of rituals and spiritual beliefs serve as a corrective function that allows the integration of a narrow individual consciousness with the larger circuits of different processes, including the collective process and what he called the ecologies of mind. So in his theories, psychoactive plants can actually be seen as tools for, as we've been talking about, blurring the ego boundaries between individuals and their larger social and ecological contexts. And ritual in this context is something that it works as an instrument to foster this self-transformation, while at the same time challenging the participants' own cultural constructs and basic assumptions about the world. So normally you are going to deconstruct the world that you used to believe in during a ritual. And he also argued that our epistemology, Western epistemology, normally perpetuates a system of understanding which is actually means to an end driven. And this narrows our perception, limiting what comes into consciousness, and therefore limiting the amount of wisdom that can be generated from our perceptions and acquired through the ritual and through these plants. And he then argued for a position of humility and acceptance of the natural system instead of our scientific arrogance in relation to it, where we think that we know better than other beings in nature. And he believes that this humility could come about only when thought and emotion and mind and the heart are combined to obtain knowledge. So I think this is actually where his thinking has an intersection with indigenous ontologies and ways of thinking, because for indigenous people, like this humility, this gratitude and wonder is really central to their beliefs and their practices. And this is actually part of their culture as well, which is for me something that it's key when we think about integration. So they nurture stance of humility and gratitude and wonder for life and for other beings. They perceive themselves as serving these other beings rather than the opposite, like us. Like we extract things from these beings to use them for our purposes. So for them, different beings, human or non-human, come into being through their relations with others. So what has been called relational ontology on social sciences. And this means that they are already integrated with the rest of nature. They actually are as we are nature. And for the Quechua speaking people, for example, the individual is constantly changing and becoming others, and people don't have this fixed identity. There is this transience and mutability that is part of every being, including us, and it's present every day in their culture and practices. And it is exactly this process of becoming others that I think it's a bit alien to us still, even though of course, we know that nothing is static, we are changing all the time, but more and more in our society, we became somehow comfort in our ways of being and behaving. And another important difference is in terms of how to integrate in their culture, in our culture, is that in many cases, we are interested in fixing something when we go to these rituals, when we use these medicines. And normally this happens at this individual level, as Batterson was referring to, in terms of the ego, of the self-transformation, and so on, instead of connecting to the spiritual realm, which is actually one of the main objectives of the use of these medicines in their culture. And we are always looking for a result as well, an answer, a solution, instead of actually learning from the process of becoming. And this normally takes time, and it's not going to happen in one ritual or in one ceremony. And this is one of the reasons why integration has been so spoken about recently. And for them, actually, the process is the means, not the end. So moving to the Yawanawá and the Huniquin, and they belong to the pano-linguistic family that inhabits the tropical forests of Peru, Bolivia, and Brazil. I'm going to speak from the Brazilian perspective. It's the groups, because they are the groups that I've been working with. And the Yawanawá, they call themselves as the people of the white-lipped peccary, the people of Queixada in Portuguese. And the Huniquin means, Huni means human, and Queen means true, so the true human. And both groups are hunter-gatherers, and in such societies, there is no distinction between spirituality and the rest of subsistence and the rest of cultural life. It's everything interwoven and linked, and their everyday life is embedded in rituals. And although today the most notable aspect of their shamanism is healing, the shaman's role is also also happens and touches different aspects of the community, such as warfare and hunting. So just to give some examples of how ayahuasca is understood by these two different groups, both of them have been leading the spread of their culture all around the world. So I think that's why I felt it would be important to understand what does it mean to these groups. And for the Huniquin, they name it Nishipai, as they believe it is the wire of enchantment. And for them, in everyday life, we can only see the ordinary side of reality and the bodies, and not the revealing side of it, the more subtle aspect of the identity that is actually common to all the living beings, which they call Yushin. And that could be maybe translated as the spirit, and perceiving the Yushin that inhabit all living beings and recognizing them as Huniquin is what actually enables the perception of equality among all beings. And for the Yawanawá, Uni, it's how they call it, and it is the sacred vine. And by naming it Uni, they are teaching us about this unity and how their constant rituals and journeys through Uni actually ensure this relationship between humans and other than human beings. That is one of union, of balance, of reciprocation, and meaning that humans never take more from other than human beings than that which they can return, and not just materially. This return is not just in our perception of reciprocation, but it's also in this spiritual perception, with honor, with gratitude, and chants and prayers that they create through the use of Uni. And none of these groups and the other indigenous groups that use ayahuasca use the term psychedelic, as Paul mentioned. For them, they are sacred medicines. And I think you can see here the jiboia, the boa constrictor, which is common to both of these groups. And I think someone mentioned, I don't know if it was Christine, mentioned about like the enchanted serpent or something. For them, this is a very sacred animal, and they see it as one of the first animals that came into our world, and the one that has its whole body connected to the earth. And as such, this animal carries a lot of knowledge in their view, and knowledge about the land, but also it's also a wise ancestor of ours. So this is very different probably than most of us here think about the jiboia, as we probably are afraid of it, but certainly similar to what our Greek ancestors once thought about the healing powers of the serpent, which actually became the main symbol of medicine. So according to the Yawanawá, taking Uni is then an opportunity to unite and expand the family. And here family refers to this extended family of humans and other than humans and spirits and so on. And through this reciprocal engagement with this being, they believe they gain this knowledge of all that exists and of their existence in this world as well. And their story about how they discovered ayahuasca come from the encounters with these beings, real encounters in real life, but also in dreams, for example. And they define themselves as the people of Queixada because they understand that together we are stronger. And in the forest, they believe that when the Queixada walk together, then they are like the strongest animal of the forest. Even the jaguars step back when they are together. And in their story, Uni came most of all with the mission of connecting them to the ones that passed away, to their ancestors. It's the story of the first death of the Yawanawá. So again, for them, everything is a ritual, from bathing themselves in the river and being thankful for the water, to hunting and praying for their prey. And to me, what I think it's one of the main lessons I learned from them is that our identities are actually formed through these active processes. And it's these identities are constructed, supported, and enhanced through communities and true relations that we have with all these different beings. And these connections from the individual to the rest of the family, how they call, also help people who are on a healing journey towards recovery. So when someone is sick, all the community get together to help that person to heal. And in terms of integration, going back to the integration, what Indigenous contexts teach us is that framing how we understand ourselves and our relations as active processes and not static ones is also crucial to understanding healing and our own journey here. So having this sense of community is an integral part of their culture and their healing techniques. and it generates a support network for bad days and difficult situations, and gives a sense of connection to people who may have experienced similar experiences, including the people that has passed away. And for them, these are teachers again. And it became evident to me as well that not just their medicines, but mainly their rituals provided the structure and the space where this self and collective transformation can take place. And again, it's important to keep in mind that these rituals are actually concerned with elements that are tangible and intangible, material and symbolic, and many times indescribable, just experienced, that actually provide these tools for transforming contexts. And another important concept for the Yawanawá, and I think some of you learned about it when they visited here last month, is Mesenai, which is related to the respect we have for others, but also how we care for others, how we care for ourselves. And I think this also relates to what Andy was saying about Foucault's care of the self, and the care we have for our family and so on, which are values that I think we are highly disconnected from in our individualistic and competitive society. So to go back to integration and try to give some concluding thoughts, I think that something that, as has been said here already, integration is not part of indigenous contexts, because they are already integrated with the rest of nature, with their own and expanded families, with the community. They have this network of different beings working together to help them and to get advice and to understand the world. And there are no spiritual and ontological conflicts, but most importantly, they listen to their intuition. They listen to these other beings. They follow like their hearts instead of their minds, which I think was something that we talked a lot about today, the mind, what happened in our mind. And this is something that to me makes integration a more natural and organic process. And I don't want to paint like a romantic idea of indigenous people here. They have been through many difficult situations, many traumas. They are still going through them. And of course, globalization has transformed them a lot already. But I do believe that many of these values are still at the core of their practices. So here I brought some quotes from Shanihu Yawanawá, who was visiting, and I had the honor to translate when he was visiting England. And he normally ends ayahuasca ceremony, uni ceremony, saying that the ceremony starts now, meaning that it is what we do after that will really matter for our purposes and our process of healing, of learning, and so on. But he does not speak about integration. He speaks about choices. He says that the main medicine is inside us, and that we have the choice of how to act, and that this is our main power. This is what we need to do. And I think it was Mark that was referring to agency. And so I think in his view is this very simple process of integration, right? Like, do your part, do your homework, make good choices, and yeah, this is it. So just to conclude and go back to what are we integrating in the end, I think, as was said here already, I think Jeff said a lot about it, is needed in our society because of different factors and the context we live in, and because we are highly disconnected from these original values. They are not just common to indigenous, but pre-industrial societies in general. We don't need to go far in the forest to find these values and practices. And then when we go back to our normal lives, it's not easy. Western and modern ontologies typically create dualities that are hierarchically linked to the society we live in, meaning we lost the indigenous concept of family as well, of community. And there is a clear ontological shift as well doing ayahuasca ceremony, but also with other medicines and psychedelics that generates a feeling of disconnection and isolation from others in our real life when we are back to real life, who cannot comprehend these new understandings that we acquired about life, and have also conflicting beliefs with the things that we learned in a ritual or with the use of a psychedelic. So it's also important that we start unlearning some of our current beliefs. And I think this is actually happening. I think we are in the middle of this process, or in the beginning maybe, because when we think about like 15 years ago, we wouldn't be talking about it like we are in this workshop. But of course, there's still a long way to walk in, and most of these things are very theoretical. We need more practice of these beliefs, of these values. But I guess in our Western modern perspective, many things start in theory to then become a practice, which is very different than the indigenous way of doing it. And just to give a quick example, I've been working to protect their rights in relation to ayahuasca, and then we had this meeting with one of the companies that is producing ayahuasca pill, and I needed to bring some indigenous to the meeting, and one of the first questions of them was like, "Have you taken ayahuasca?" to the CEOs and the researcher there that was presenting their ideas about the ayahuasca pill, and none of them have taken ayahuasca. Yeah. So imagine for the indigenous asking that, it was her first question was like, "Have you taken ayahuasca?" So how come, like for her, it was, how come are you developing something and studying something that you have never experienced? So for many of these indigenous groups, not just the Yawanawá, the practice of ayahuasca, it starts with experimentation. It's like every note in their chants, every movement in a dance, every song, every art, like the songs of the plants, as Christine was saying, all of them carry an intrinsic meaning, call it ontological meaning, that is intricately interwoven with the fabric of their existence. So these expressions of culture and spirituality, they're not just performances or a substance that you take. They are actually, they have this profound significance that surpasses the objectiveness of our society, and even eludes the limited capacity of our five senses. So it's, as Shani Hu also was saying when he was visiting here, it's like another language. They call it the spiritual language. But yeah, we can give any name, but it's a completely different language from what we are talking about here in these conferences. And I think this spiritual language is also something that we are needing to relearn, to go back to. And it's this language and the true essence of the indigenous culture that is awakened, especially through these rituals. And it's something that defies objective explanation. It's most of the times we cannot explain it. It's deeply felt in our body, in our emotions. And I think there was this description by Durkheim in 1912 that he called it as a collective effervescence, like this communal elevation, this state of elevation that transcends and envelops the ritual itself. But it's also important to think not just about the communal rituals that we can have, but also the rituals that we can have with ourselves, our own small everyday rituals, like drinking a coffee or taking our shower and bath, thinking of the power of water and so on, being more mindful about these small rituals. And rather than solely considering psychedelics as promoters of the whole in terms of the integration, right? Of the complete, of the integrated, and of the connectedness, promoters of connectedness, as we've been calling here. It's also important to ask what causes this connectedness. Is it the substance? Is it the ritual? Is it the music, the community, the actions we take after, or the reactions we have? Or is everything together? And it's also important to step outside of the means to an end mind setting and trust the process. I think we are lacking the trust that Indigenous people have. They really trust these plants as teachers, as I was saying in the beginning, as spirits, as knowledgeable spirits. And they don't go and keep asking what happened after a ceremony. You know, they just trust what they saw. They trust what they experienced. They are not asking and trying to put it into words and to objectify it. And another important point is the process of union, listening, and attuning to other presences, other beings, as Ross was saying, in terms of the trees. And in Indigenous groups, this is not just limited to the shamans, but it's also practiced by all the community in different daily situations. So I think the more we incorporate this in our daily lives, the best will be our integration process. And finally, we need to keep in mind that the Amazonian conceptions of healing typically, again, happens through the body instead of the brain or mind. And I think Andy was saying that since the very first mentions to integration, it was actually, again, about the mind. But for Indigenous cultures, we need to take care of the bodies, of the spirits, pay attention to how we feed ourselves. And here, I mean, all types of feedings, from information to food, from how we feed our spirit to our body, to the matter as well. And also going back to whatever experience we had with these medicines or in a ritual, not just in our minds, but with our bodies, with our hearts, to be able to really embody the learning, embody the experience we had. And this is another example, like in the ceremonies Shanihu gave when he was visiting the UK. He was always saying to me, you know, why don't the British dance? It's like, even when we invite them, sometimes they feel there's no point of being here, you know, singing and asking them, let's dance. This is one for dancing and so on. Because again, for them, dancing is an expression of this culture, these beings, and these learnings. It's almost like your body is going to learn through dancing, like through the incorporation of the chanting into moves. And I think this is another thing we need to relearn as well, like how to dance. And again, just to emphasize what Ross was saying as well, we don't need to go far into the Amazon to do all these things. Like, we can do it here, we can do in this land, we can get together with grassroots communities, with the trees that are present here, and start interacting more with them. I will just finish with this citation, this quote from Chief Nishiwaka Yawanawá at the Psychedelic Science last year. He said, I think, I'm going to read and then I'm going to comment. He said, the scientists will spend many years researching about these medicines, but if you do not understand the oranges of these mental health diseases, we will continue to lose time. These illnesses are linked to everything that you, the white, the Western people, are doing. I am not against the science that you are doing with our sacred plants, but why don't you invite the true connoisseurs of these plants? What point we have arrived in this human ignorance? We are living in a new cycle, a new time of humanity, time of forgiveness, time of alliances, time for peace, time for love. Our human society is declining. If we don't reveal the concept of humanity, the future of humanity may not be long. We need to get together. We are with open arms for this new dialogue, this new discussion. But you are doing all this for the market, for your egos, for prizes. But only when you include us, you support us, you are healing the planet. We need to reconnect with our essence. So I think it shows a lot about how we are still ignoring their knowledge and about our cultural ignorance. What some I actually have argued that was the reason why Western science has been aware of ayahuasca for nearly 4 centuries, but its medicinal benefits have not been further studied because we kind of like, we felt it was something, that didn't have any value. And even more astonishing is that our understanding of it today is no more advanced than that of the researchers who first encountered it. So I wonder, what is science and who defines it and for what purposes? Because why do we need psychedelic research to legitimate something that has been already experienced and showed by indigenous people for many centuries? And more importantly, can science explain everything? And I think we are so embedded in this culture and this dominance of science that even here we included the indigenous in the subculture panel, while in this for these medicines they are the culture. So yeah, I will finish because I think I don't have more time with this last quote from Ashaninka shaman, where he says that this is how nature talks. It talks to us in our visions. When a shaman drinks his camarampi, which is how they call ayahuasca, the spirits present themselves to him and explain everything. And again, it shows how they exchange the knowledge with these medicines and not this extraction logic that normally we as scientists, we focus on. Thank you.
Thank you, Faye. Quite fascinating. Quickly, some housekeeping.